Alrighty, so I am your moderator today. My name is Callie Rouse. I work as the International Health and Safety Assistant at CGIS, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And we are here with the CGIS team this week, as well as our special guest, one of our coworkers. And yes, as moderator, if you guys have any questions you want to ask throughout the presentation, just send me a chat and I can share out at that time or hold it to the end as makes sense at the moment. So to get started, what is the CGIS brief? So today we're going to be talking finessing scholarships. So each week each 2 weeks, we talk about different special topics for 30 minutes with our team and special guests, and kind of try to break down that topic that we generally don't get to in our orientations, general info sessions, and things like that. And so this week, well, before we get to that, actually, I should introduce my co-hosts, Stephen and Ashton. Do you want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, sure. My name is Ashton, and I am an Intercultural Programs Advisor in CGIS.
And I'm Stephen Gonzalez. I'm the Communication Specialist here at CGIS. And my pronouns are he, him, his.
And our special guest.
Hi, I am Sarah Pauling. I am one of the senior advisors at CGIS. I also volunteered this past year reading the Gilman Scholarship applications, which is a National Study Abroad scholarship. So I was going to talk a little bit from my experience as a reviewer about how to structure your application and what we were looking for.
Awesome. So yes, like I said, finessing scholarships is this week's topic. So we're going to be going through, some common scholarships that you may want to be on the lookout for, why you should care about scholarships, especially maybe so early on if you're thinking of like a spring summer program or even later, and also kind of giving you advice on what can you do to make a compelling scholarship application. So I'm going to start us off. Why does it matter? Why does it matter to think about scholarships, especially, right now when like absolutely no travel is happening, but imminently, hopefully. So with COVID-19, it's impacted a lot of different things. So one is funding changes. The university, like a lot of other places, has been hit financially, and it might impact what amount of funding is going to be available to students this year. Maybe things that have been able to be offered to years past, or maybe if like this is like another time you're trying to go, like you've seen your friends get in the past, it may look a little bit different this academic year and into the next coming years. So it's really important to keep an eye out that, knowing that your financial aid package or your scholarship package or scholarship like amount you're eligible for may be different. It's also really important to think about this in the context of your own unique financial aid package that may change year to year. And be weighing that with, okay, how am I going to, bridge the gap between my financial aid that I get at UM and making it so I can study abroad. In addition, planning ahead is really important. There are requirements and deadlines coming through. I was just on a chat with somebody who works with the Gilman, and they were talking about like, oh, January is like the next time everything starts up for the Gilman again. I was like, oh my God, so soon. And so it's really important to know when these deadlines are, what the requirements are for different things, and make sure that you aren't missing out on money and leaving it on the table. In addition, it's important because you could potentially get your program completely funded through grants and scholarships. You definitely, don't have to be necessarily taking out loans and things like that and relying on friends and family. It could be possible for you to be able to fully fund your experience and make it totally doable for you. So, yeah, next slide.
Thanks, Callie. I think it's really important that you pointed out that everyone's budget is different, everyone's financial aid package is different, and whether you receive financial aid or not, I think the first step is understanding how much money you're going to need to fund your study abroad experience. And so where do you start looking? It can be really overwhelming. I'm sure when you were applying to colleges, you were also applying to scholarships, and there are so many different things to look at. So really the first place to start is the CGIS website. I've got a little screen grab here. And when you're on our website, if you hover over undergraduate students, there will be a financial aid and scholarships option. So you'll pick on that and it will go to a page that really talks in depth about the LSA Study Abroad Scholarship. And if you don't meet that eligibility criteria, which we'll talk about in a moment, you can go to other scholarships and you'll find some of these accordions that I have this big red arrow pointed to at the bottom. So where else can you look? Your first step will be like an academic department. Some students will get funding from Romance Languages and Literatures, or maybe even like the II if you're an international studies major. And then another place you can look is Google. Google is going to be your best friend in this. And we'll talk a little bit about different scholarships we've found and students have found via Google and the different, search words that you could be looking for. And then also we work with a lot of partners abroad. There's a lot of acronyms in the study abroad world. So if you start researching programs, you may notice that you're going to be studying abroad through CIEE or IES. And these are our trusted partners, and they oftentimes have really great scholarships. Some of them are needs-based and some of them are identity-based. So that's also a really great place to look. And just on a final note, before we move on to the next slide, CGIS advisors are here to help you. So if you feel lost and you're not sure where to start and you really need some scholarship money, please make an appointment with us and we'll definitely walk you through it. Okay, so I know this slide has a lot of words, so we'll kind of break it down a little bit for you. On the left-hand side, we have a lot of like major common scholarships that you've probably heard of. When you first go to the CGIS website, you're going to see the LSA Study Abroad Scholarship, the Gilman. And I think here it's just really important to realize that eligibility criteria is really important. So for example, the Gilman, you have to be a Pell Grant recipient. For the LSA Study Abroad Scholarship, you have to be in LSA and receive some sort of needs-based funding. So if you don't fall into any of those categories, where can you look to? And as I mentioned earlier, your academic department is a great place. The International Institute, which is listed under here as IISF, they also have a lot of funding for really unique programs. Another tactic is to use your student groups on campus. So less common scholarships we have listed, like the CSP Opportunity Grant. I also know that Honors and the RC have funding, as well as other learning communities like HSSSP. So look at all your resources, look at the clubs you're connected to, use your resources. So the next one is thinking about location. So maybe you can just Google study abroad scholarships in Madagascar. The one we have listed as an example is the Bridging Scholarships for study abroad in Japan. So that is an actual scholarship one of our students was awarded in the past. And then finally, use your identity. That may get you some extra cash you weren't expecting. For example, scholarships for people with red hair, or traveling as a member of the LGBTQ community. We've listed some organizations like Diversity Abroad and the NASA Rainbow Scholarship for students who identify within that community. So there's a lot of different ways, and you have to, get creative and have a little bit of fun when you look for scholarships. And I know Callie has a really great personal story where she found a scholarship, and I'll let her tell it.
Yeah, so speaking of less common scholarships, so I have a rare vision disorder, and I don't even know how I found it nowadays, but I was just searching around and I found out that there was this organization for people who have nystagmus, and that they had scholarships for college students. And it wasn't anything to do with like study abroad or anything. They were just like, hey, you have this rare disease and you want money and you're in college, apply. And I was like, yo, this is my life story and I have this. And I received it. I think they gave me like $1,000, and I actually applied for it my junior year when I ended up traveling abroad. And so I set that $1,000 aside and I used it for travel expenses when I was studying abroad. So definitely it's like, you can really find this kind of thing. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing, Callie. And I think you brought up a good point of that specific scholarship wasn't necessarily geared towards study abroad, or it didn't clearly say that in the criteria. And when you're searching, if you don't find that, either inquire or look at the FAQs about the study abroad scholarship or the non-study abroad scholarship, just to see if you can use it on those types of experiences. And then one final note before I pass it along to Sarah is that some of these scholarships may only be $250, and you're looking for $10,000. And my advice is to apply to anything, no matter how small it is, because you never know how well funded it is or how many other people are applying. You could be the perfect applicant that they're looking for. So on that note, I'm going to pass it on to Sarah, who is going to talk about how to make a great application.
Yeah. So again, a lot of this is based on my experiences reviewing for the Gilman Scholarship this past year. So that's a national scholarship for Pell Grant recipient students who want to travel abroad. So some of the things that I learned in terms of what we were looking for in review, we definitely wanted candidates that were self-reflective. You don't have to have already traveled the world and have a gazillion accomplishments. You just need to be able to take the experiences you do have and talk about them in a way that pulls out concrete lessons. So that ability to condense into a lesson was really, really helpful to see on an application. Unique stories and angles. Sometimes there might be a lot of people applying for a given scholarship. So if you can think about what makes you unique, maybe among the people who are applying or among the people going to the program you're going to, and talk about that in a unique angle, unique skills that you have that could sort of add to your cohort. Are you an artist? Are you planning on using this unrelated program as part of your art project as well? So those unique personal components are helpful. We're also looking for people who most benefit from this experience, right? So again, it's not like it's a job application where we're only looking for the person who has the most qualifications. We're looking for someone who has qualifications, yes, but is also able to make a lot of growth in their time abroad. So if you can emphasize that you are the best person to give it to for your own benefit and where you want to go in life, that's a good thing. Like, what are you going to do with the experience that will help you? And don't self-reject. I knew of a lot of students who were not sure whether or not they wanted to apply for things because they didn't think they were the perfect candidate. Definitely apply. You don't know who else is applying. You don't know how many students are applying. And if you have the time and effort, I think it's always worth it. Some other things that sound self-explanatory on the surface, but are actually really important. Researching the scholarship. What is the organization that is giving out this scholarship? What is their mission statement? What is their purpose in doing this? Are you aligned with their mission statement? Can you talk about that in your application? Reading the prompt, I know it sounds super obvious, but there were many, many students who basically wrote a very good essay, except they had missed a phrase in the prompt. And we mathematically could not score them well, even though the rest of the essay was great, because they had missed a whole segment of the essay. So read it twice, read it 3 times, just be absolutely sure, especially if the formatting looks wonky, that can hide things, just to be completely positive that you have every angle of the prompt and address it. Telling a story, of course, definitely advice you hear everywhere, but it's really true. Talking about challenges, telling a success story, or how this can become your success story. And again, talking about that unique angle thing, I want to emphasize that also means looking at the pool who might be applying to this specific scholarship, right? So the Gilman Scholarship had a requirement that you receive a Pell Grant. So everybody in the pool received a Pell Grant. But we got a lot of essays from students who used up room talking about their Pell Grant and about how, this scholarship would be really helpful for them in terms of money because they receive a Pell Grant. But unfortunately, we couldn't really use that information because that was the same criteria for everyone in the pool. So you're going to want to look at the criteria and sort of eliminate some of the, if not eliminate, at least de-emphasize the points that you're going to share with pretty much everybody. It's good to have, you're going to have common goals no matter what, but look for the places that you're going to be different and you're going to have a different angle than other people in the pool. These are just some ways to think about ensuring that your essay is well-rounded. Think of them as structures, but they're not really mutually exclusive. You can really include both of these in the same essay. So past, present, future, pretty self-explanatory, although we'll get to an example in a moment. And ethos, logos, and pathos. So these are ways to argue. Ethos is an argument that says, I have authority on the subject, or I am qualified. So arguing that you are qualified. Logos is arguing for a logical reason that you should be given money. And pathos is arguing for an emotional reason that you should be given money. So to kind of go through some examples on the next slide. So this is kind of what I mean by past, present, future. Obviously, this is not a full essay. You're going to want to expand much more past this, but this is sort of a skeleton. So this person began learning German because of his grandmother. He experienced specific stumbling blocks that he was able to overcome because of specific reasons it mattered to him to overcome. You know, it was important to him, and here's why, and here's what he did about it. That's all past. That is all what led him to this moment. Then in Germany, which I consider the present, right? So sort of what you're going to be doing to make the most of the moment while you're abroad. He's going to visit her hometown. He's going to, do things that are relevant to his major and his career, and he's going to make the best of the time and presumably the money they give him while he's in Germany. And then future, how is that going to impact his career trajectory or his personal, achievements? He talks about being able to communicate better with his grandmother. He's going to be talking about working in his field, possibly abroad, and why that matters to him. So you've got this really solid progression of logic of where he came from, what he would do in the moment, and where he would go from there. Next slide, thank you. So this student structured a little differently, right? So this student starts with ethos, or why she's qualified. So she grew up with a strong interest in biology, she overcame specific challenges, and she gained specific credentials, which presumably she then lists all her impressive things that she's done. So that's kind of establishing why she's a good fit in terms of qualifications. Then she talks about logically why it would be good to send her, right? It's a perfect fit. She'll get, specific experience in a subfield she likes. She'll decide her career path based on it, maybe. All very logical argument. Then she kind of expands out to make a slightly more emotional or ethical argument, basically, to talk about being a woman in STEM and how it's important to her to show other people and other women that they can follow and do whatever they'd like to do in the field. So you can see there's overlap, right? Like this one also has some past, present, future, but these are two sort of dimensions you can focus on when you're writing an essay to ensure that it's really well-rounded, both in terms of how you argue and the story you're telling. Oh, and then we're going to transition to talking a little bit about health and safety, given the current state of the world. We've been kind of including that in each of these. So I'm going to hand this off to, is it Stephen?
Yes.
All right.
I get to talk. Yeah, so it obviously wouldn't be a brief if we weren't looking at this through a health and safety lens. So here are just a couple of things to keep in mind. The CDC or the US State Department travel warnings may affect some scholarships. And what that means is they may prohibit funding to certain areas that may be considered restricted areas. So, for example, government-funded scholarships like the Gilman are very much attuned with US government restrictions. So, like the chances of, you being able to use the Gilman for a country that is restricted according to the government are very, the chances are high. You won't be able to receive funding for that. So you're going to want to make sure you're looking and researching the area that you're wanting to travel to. Something else to keep in mind too, and if you can do this during the application process, is figuring out how to see if you can transfer funding to another term. So for example, if you are wanting to go abroad during the spring or summer, but let's say COVID-19 cases spike and you may not be able to use that funding because your program is either postponed or canceled, you're definitely going to want to see if you can somehow get a deferral for that scholarship to another term. And then lastly, UM travel restrictions and warnings are very important for you if you want to receive funding from the University of Michigan. So if you get funding, for example, from the International Institute to study abroad in France, but France is still very much restricted by the time you're going to need funding, they're not going to be able to provide those funds for you because that country is on the University of Michigan travel restriction and warning list, right? So it's important for you to know which countries are restricted, even at the level. And I think Callie can probably speak to this a little bit more, but even if, for example, the United States isn't restricting, let's use France again, for example, but for some reason, the University of Michigan is still, it's still on the list for University of Michigan programs and students can't actually go there for a program, that's gonna really make or break, I guess, your time, so to speak. And so just make sure you're looking at all of that or you're thinking about it when you're applying to your for your scholarships. And lastly, sorry, I know I just said lastly, but lastly, Callie makes up half of the health and safety team. So her or Rachel Reuter are happy to talk to you if you have any questions or concerns. Callie, I don't know if you'd like to drop y'all's emails in the chat box, if they can reach out to you all if they have any questions or concerns regarding travel restrictions and warnings and things like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can certainly do so. I would also want to make note. So if you're kind of wondering, like, okay, like what does the restrictions and warnings mean? So if you're an undergraduate student, so I assume you all are, that means that you cannot go to travel restriction countries. And then under current circumstances, only really select graduate students are being allowed to restricted countries. So for example, if your country, France, is under a warning and you want to be able to go there, it is more likely that yes, they'll be able to give you the funds. You just have to fill out a safety plan if you're going independently, or if you're going through like CGIS, we'll most likely be handling it on our end and you won't really have to worry. The nice thing is if you go through CGIS, we'll handle all the fancy health and safety plan logistics in the background, but I will definitely drop our emails in the chat so you can reach out to us, especially if you want kind of like a gauge on like, okay, like what is the likelihood that Brazil is going to be opened up by spring, summer. We don't have crystal balls. We don't know what it's going to be like, but we can kind of give you general gauges, especially Rachel. She's super, super attuned to what other health and safety in the international education realm professionals are talking about different countries. So I will make sure to do so.
Thanks, Kelly.
And just to kind of sum up, some of the resources that are helpful as you're thinking about applying to these scholarships and to programs in general. The CGIS website, I want to emphasize again, a great start when you're looking for scholarships. Whenever we learn about something, we put it there. It's not exhaustive, but it's quite a few. The mCompass website actually has an advanced search function where you can switch to funding as opposed to programs and work from there. It'll pop up some scholarships. If you're looking to turn in an essay with some feedback, the Sweetland Center for Writing is a great resource. They can help you with and critique your essays. Even if you're absolutely sure that your essay is amazing, it's worth having someone look it over. I know I always, when I'm writing something and I show it to someone else, inevitably I've missed something that makes it stronger. Also, Office of Financial Aid, we haven't really touched on this, but if you do receive federal aid on campus, likely at least some of it can go abroad with you if you're going on like a U of M program. So it makes a lot of sense to check in with them. Likely the funding wouldn't be enough to cover a whole program on its own, which is why scholarship applications are super important. But at the same time, it makes sense to learn more about what, the financial aid office could do for you at the beginning. So that's something I wanted to add in there as well.
Awesome. Questions? I noticed we had one question in the chat, which is where the recording will be posted, and Ashton nicely provided where the briefs will be posted. We can also send this out to everyone who was on this conversation after the fact, so you guys can have this for posterity to reference back to. But otherwise, does anyone have any questions for us we can answer? You can either put it in the chat or just unmute yourself and ask.
This is kind of like a specific question, but one of the programs I'm looking at has a question in the application. Do you have a passport? And it's just yes or no. Do I need to get a passport before I apply to that, or do I just click no?
Is the question on the mCompass application, or is it on like a different website?
One of my friends recommended it to me, so I don't think it's like related to U of M.
Okay. In general, a lot of programs, depending on how far in the future they are, will let you apply without a passport. It's a little shaky right now, of course, with everything going on. So you might want to reach out to the program and double check. But in a normal world, it would be fine in most cases to apply with no passport and get one, as soon as you knew you were going. But again, because everything's funky right now, it might be worth reaching out to the program to ask.
Okay, thank you.
And I would say they are also more likely to be more sympathetic to, like, if you're like trying to get a passport and like you aren't able to. I know I was working with a student who, like, it took her the entire summer to get her passport. So I don't think things are slowed down as much as that as they were in the summertime, but definitely processes have been slowed down. And so you can definitely be like, hey, like it's taking a while, like things like that as well. So we had a question, and I'm going to pose this towards Sarah. So when you apply for need-based financial aid, do you provide your 2019 FAFSA info or 2020 FAFSA? Do you know? Or is that a great question?
So it's gonna need to be the most recent FAFSA that you have on file, preferably up to date in the right timeline for updating your FAFSA for the year. It's a little tough to answer that with a blanket answer because there are different financial aid timelines for different program times of year, right? So like if you're going abroad in a winter term, you're going to be getting financial aid information together in like the summer or the fall beforehand, whereas it's kind of reversed if you're going in the fall or the summer. Basically, it's going to be it's going to make sense to reach out to financial aid if there's any confusion about what your current FAFSA year should be, but it should be the most updated one you have available at any given time.
Oh, and I just, as you were saying that, it made me think, if your family has faced any particular hardships, this year, especially with COVID, that is a really good reason to make sure you have your 2020 FAFSA, because you may receive larger package if you're dealing with larger financial hardships this year. So where can we find a list of countries that has banned? That's a really good question. I just found the link and I will drop that in there. That's on the Global Michigan website. And I went straight to that. It actually lists out basically what countries are not restricted right now, because it's a much shorter list to say where can you go at present. Now this is pretty limited, and if you're like nothing I'm interested in is on there, that's okay. They are having periodic reviews of this going on, and I know like CGIS in particular, like we're going to be reviewing again in January, February to see, okay, the viability of our spring summer programs and making sure those run. So that list may be changing over time, but that's where we keep everything comprehensively.
A question for Sarah. What advice would you give a student who is maybe applying to 2 different study abroad programs in the same term? They're not quite sure where they're going to go or where they're going to get accepted, but they have a scholarship deadline coming up and they need to write a really good essay. How would you advise them on writing the essay?
Yeah. So I would say that unless the application instructions say otherwise, it makes sense to write exclusively to one program. So pick the one that you're most interested in, that you're most likely to choose if you get in, and write it to that program. Scholarship organizations know that they have early deadlines sometimes, that people's plans change, especially this year and last year. So if you can't go on that specific program, it's usually quite possible to switch. I would say a lot of, the information you put in for a scholarship application has to be tentative if they're early deadlines. I know the LSA scholarship for sure, they want you to just pick one. When it comes to the Gilman scholarship, I know that they can move you pretty easily to a different program. So pick one so that your essay can be stronger overall by focusing on that location and topic.
Awesome. Well, we are running just a little over, so I am going to skip to the CGIS, or next time on the CGIS brief, and then if you have any final questions, we can take those. So yes, next time on the CGIS brief, we are going to be talking about travel safe, scams, and fraud abroad. We're going to be joined by our coworker, Ben Pipert, and he's also an Intercultural Programs Advisor, and he has done some research into what are common scams that you may encounter abroad, and how you can make sure to keep yourself safe while abroad. Because while everything is really focused on COVID right now, I was literally just chatting with people about, COVID safety or general safety, that you can't forget about the other stuff too on top of it. And we have stories that we're going to be sharing out, both, stories that our students have experienced, which I think are always interesting, as well as like stories we found online as well. And that is in 2 weeks from today, same time, same Zoom chat link or Zoom link.
Same place.
So we will be there, and hope to see you guys there as well. Before we finish out today, are there any final questions anyone has for us?
Cool.
All right, I'm gonna guess that's a no. Yes, so we will hope to be able to send this out to you once we're able to get a recording. And thank you guys for joining us today, and have a great Thursday. All right.
Bye.
Thank you.